So I think, and do you first of all see my screen in a moment? Do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Brian Cracknell with the presentation about managing intangibles in the project. Brian, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Gundaz. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Hello from a warm afternoon in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Thank you for joining this keynote, Keynote 3, and understand it's early in the day for a lot of people, so we'll keep this one fairly light. Welcome to everybody. Thank you, Young Crew, and for the Global E-Collaboration Competition GeCCo for inviting me to do this session on managing intangibles in projects. Before we get into that, just a little introduction about myself. My name's Brian Cracknell. I'm originally from the UK, but I'm based in Malaysia. I've worked with my company here, Language Works, for 31 years, and I've been involved with the IPMA Project Excellence Award for 11 years, 1 year as an assessor and 10 years as a team lead assessor. I'm also involved in the Malaysian Association of Project Management as the committee member responsible for training, research and education, and I'm also involved in green project management, very interested in sustainability. Just to set the scope a little bit for the presentation, I won't be looking at intangible assets or looking at people-independent elements. Instead, I'll be looking at the experience, the processes, the activities, the know-how, the competencies that we need, and particularly those dependent on people in projects. So that's how we'll scope and define intangibles. And I'll be drawing a lot on my experience working in projects, and these are mainly learning and development projects in Asia and the East, but also my experience as an IPMA team lead assessor in the Project Excellence Award. So let me just go to the first slide, thank you. Something about the structure of the presentation. We're going to divide it into 5 parts. So the first one is, do you see what I see? Then we'll look at, do you think what I think? We'll move on to examining doing what others don't do, and finish off with reflection and conclusion, and a note at the end about mindfulness. And then, of course, questions that you've got, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so managing intangibles in projects. Now, we all know it's a very, very volatile environment. Disruption, reshaping, innovation is changing the way we do everything, and in particular how we mobilize action in projects. So we need to measure, we need to evaluate, we need to manage intangibles more than ever, and we need to do it more effectively. And we know that measuring intangibles makes a significant difference in terms of decision making, but also crucially in terms of individual learning. And yet, perhaps it's only the balanced scorecard is the most commonly known of these intangibles and a way to measure it. Sustainable brands is a source that you might want to go to. You can Google that. This is an organization, a group of people. I just went to their conference in Bangkok a couple of weeks ago, Sustainable Brands, and they are doing a lot of work in new metrics, new ways to measure the often intangible aspects of projects and brands that we need to know more about. So we need more evidence. The focus here is going to be my own experience and also feedback from questions that I've put to others on measuring and controlling intangibles. And the attempt is to outline some best practices that are most fruitful, most beneficial measures for projects. And in particular, we need to look at motivating people to act in line with objectives, project objectives, coordinating our efforts, and also providing info about performance results. There's one study that's been done in 1997 by Svelby called the Intangible Assets Monitor, and he lists 3 key areas to look at in intangible assets. First one is growth and renewal. There's a lot of evidence to show that individuals grow greatly as a result of involvement in projects, and you've probably found this yourself. Second area is efficiency, and a third area is stability. Okay, let's look at the next slide. So first question is, do you see what I see? Now, I don't mean this in terms of groupthink, that we all have to think exactly the same as the next person. We often think of it in terms of what I call communicative capability. And this is the next slide. So communicative capability is often referred to as the term soft skills. Personally, I'm not really in favour of that. I think that's a bit of an outdated phrase, and in fact there's a lot of evidence to show that the so-called soft skills, communication and so forth, are the new hard skills on projects, the ones that matter most of all. In this area in particular, there are some interesting developments in measuring communicative capability. One I would recommend in particular that we use a lot is the Common European Framework of References. Common European Framework of Reference. And this measures capability in language and communication on 3 stages: proficient, independent, and basic. And it's not so much about marks, it's about behaviors. Now, since a lot of us are probably waking up, let's pose a question. What are the 3 most important communicative capabilities, in your opinion? What are the 3 most important communicative capabilities for a project manager? Let's just take 30 seconds to think about that one.
And write your answers and thoughts into question box. So we have some answers like listening, asking, and integrate ideas.
Okay, all right. You will probably have different. Right, you'll probably have different opinions on this one. I'd just like to go to the next slide to give one view, and we can bear this one in mind and come back to it a little bit later. Okay, this is based on the opinions of Indra Nui, who's the CEO of PepsiCo, and she did a presentation at the Global Summit of Women 2013 where she listed these 3 as the key elements, in her view, in communicative capability. So the first one is contributing effectively in dialogue. We don't just mean random conversation. We mean this as a living technology, a structured approach where we listen very attentively, and we see it as a way, if we structure it well and we listen very carefully, it's a way to control and to manage behavior in our projects. So contributing effectively in dialogue is certainly one of them. Second one is writing logically and punctually. And the third one is speaking cogently, persuasively, and confidently. So this is one person's view, which a lot of people in the field would share. Let's move on to our next slide. So after communicative capability, of course, building relationships is key in managing intangibles. And this is something that we do over a long period of time. It's hard work, can be hard work, but it's something that is inescapable. And I know that this is a very important part of our work in IPMA. One of the reasons why I've worked with IPMA so often is the relationships that are built in the project work, and I'm sure with Young Crew you feel the same. Let's look at the third one after building relationships, the next slide. And this is the big L, listening actively. I think it's become very evident in the last few years that we find that listening is declining as a skill. In fact, if you have a colleague or a friend who's studying a language, you might want to try this little test and ask them what skills are they learning when they're learning the language. And they'll probably say speaking, writing. They might think for a minute and say reading, but they probably won't even mention listening. And yet this is really crucial in terms of projects, that we listen, and we listen actively. We shouldn't be multitasking, as they say, at the same time. We'll come on to that a little bit later. So active listening, giving your full attention to what people are saying, not just waiting to get your statement in, is a crucial intangible that we need to manage. Let's go on to look at aligning in the next slide. This is a very important one. I find that aligning individual development of project team members and the interests of project team members with your project objectives, the skills, the techniques, the attitudes, the experience, the knowledge that everybody needs to develop and wants to develop. We have to pay attention to this as a project manager, and I've seen this particularly when we've done the IPMA Project Excellence site visits. I'll give you one example. A few years ago, a project in Qatar which involved building a workshop. The manager of the workshop called over a young guy who had been involved in developing a robot for a specialist task, and this had helped him greatly in developing his own individual skills. It was one of his interests, but it was clear that the project manager had geared that to achieving the project objectives as well. So this is what we mean when we say aligning individual development and interest with project objectives. Okay, so that's, do you see what I see? These are some areas that could come under that heading. Let's move to our second point, which is, do you think what I think? And that's the next slide. Now, Edward de Bono is a famous thinker who has come up with the 6 thinking hats, and probably a lot of you have used these or been involved with these in some way. Not so much thinking about that, although that is a useful tool. I'd like to highlight some areas of intangibles here that are important when we're working on projects. So let's go to our next slide. Now, the first one I'd like to mention is genuine concern. Now, you get a lot of these pictures like you've got on the slide at the moment, which show people pretending to look very engaged and interested while they look at computer screens or charts, or pretend to be listening to each other. But I thought this particular picture showed some genuine interest, and I think we have to emphasize the word genuine. There's a lot of spin around, there's a lot of false friendliness, there's a lot of what passes as branding and marketing, and I think we have to pay particular attention to being real, to being genuine. What you see is what you get, particularly when you're managing intangibles in projects. I think people can very quickly nowadays see through somebody who's not genuine, so you've got to be straight with people. The second word, concern, this can mean care, and I think as a project manager you have to show genuine care for your project team. And you've also got to be focused on the other meaning of the word, the concern, which is going concern, keeping everything moving as you would with your business. Let's go on to the second part then on the next slide. And this is what we call ECR, engaging. Now this means, first of all, attuning to the project team members and what their needs and aspirations are and their characters, holding attention, but not just, engaging doesn't just mean holding attention, it also means moving people to action, getting them to do something. Of course, you collaborate, which means working together, so that we can achieve more together than we do with individual efforts, and that's very important on IPMA Project Excellence Award projects. And of course, retaining. Now that can mean retaining people, keeping them in your team, keeping them in your group, keeping their attention. It can mean retaining information. It can also mean retaining memories. Let's move on to the next intangible under Do You Think What I Think? This is trust and transparency, which are linked together. Trust, as we know, is something that can be built over a long time. You've probably got very good friends who you trust thoroughly. If you think about how long you've known them, it's probably a very long time. But trust takes a long time to build, but it can be lost in a moment. And we have to be mindful of this when we're managing projects, that we must be trustworthy as project managers. There's nothing worse than feeling that you can't trust a person who's leading you. And the second one is transparency. And I think we know that this has been a big problem in recent years. My generation hasn't exactly distinguished itself by its transparency. And I think it's something that needs attention. And in our projects, we pay great attention to being clear, being open to questions, and walking the talk. Okay, let's go to the next one, which I would say is the crucial component, values. And this is something that we need to be very aware of, I would say, in our projects. Values help to drive project improvements, and they also underpin people's behaviours. So every project that I'm involved in as a TLA or as a project manager, I look, and when I'm getting to know the suggested team beforehand, this is something I look for very carefully. Are the values of the team members in sync, in line? If you have any misgivings that team members' values are not going to be in line with the behaviours that you want, then you need to make sure that you do something about that before the project begins. In my experience, many projects have been derailed or impaired because team members do not really share the same values. It gets in the way of driving your project later, and behaviours are affected. So let's go to our third point. We've looked at, do you see what I see? Do you think what I think? We go to our next one, and let's pose another question. Doing what others don't do. So my question is, what intangible is most often lacking in project teams? And you see we've got a big R there. So it's something beginning with R. The question is, what intangible is most often lacking in project teams, in your opinion? And it begins with R. Let's take 30 seconds again. You can write it down, or you can have a think about, in your view, what's most often lacking in project teams? A word beginning with R. Okay, time's up there. Now,
no ideas. Let's move on.
Okay, we'll come back to this a little bit later. I'd be happy to look at this when we get the questions, but just keep that for a moment. One person who asked about this recently came back straight away with reliability. There's a feeling, particularly in a lot of projects here at the moment in Malaysia, that we can't rely on people as much as we used to. This is an area that needs to be stressed a lot more at kick-off meetings and at earlier meetings. Respect is another word that often comes up, but I've got another word that I'll bring into the picture towards the end of the presentation, and you've got your own ideas as well, so we'll have a look at that. But let's just look at some of those things that what others don't do and what we need to do, particularly moving forward in the projects of the future. Let's go to the next slide for that one. There's a lot of emerging contexts that we need to be able to converse in, whether it's apps, emails, tweets, Instagram, Snapchat, Trello, Rike. There's so many different domains and platforms that we are conversing in. And I mean by this not just conversing Facebook, but conversing in cyberspace. And we don't really know a lot about these yet, because the context is emerging all the time. And this is going to be a feature of the workplace, the project place, for a long time to come, that the context is changing as we're adapting to it. It's very often said, for example, that we can't really train kids at school for the jobs of the future because the jobs that they're going to have haven't been invented yet. So we need to be looking at conversation skills, and I don't just mean the random conversations over coffee, but really engagingly listening to people, understanding what they're trying to say, having a genuine dialogue with the proper intention of trying to understand people rather than talk over them or talk past them. And then the second area here is capacity building. It's said that if an organization is not focusing at least 25% on capacity building as part of its profit, that it is already falling behind. So we shouldn't just be thinking of the dollars, we should be thinking of building people's capacity. This is also another word that is coming out a lot nowadays is future-proofing, making sure that we have the skills, we have the capacity, we have the resilience to withstand the changes that are coming in our projects, in our organizations in the future. Now that can be skills training, but it can also be a lot of other things. Let's go to the next, doing what others don't do. We've looked at conversation skills, capacity building, the conversing in emerging contexts. We've spoken a little bit about that one. Let's move to the next slide. And this is a little technique to share here. Some of you may be familiar with this already. I think it's very important on projects to influence people. Now, we hear a lot about this. A lot of people have written about this topic. But perhaps it's more important than ever to creatively influence people. And a very handy formula that very often we use in projects and on programs is this one, SCAMPER. And it stands for S, substitute. So if you want to influence people, if you want to do something more effectively, what could you substitute? Is there a process you could substitute? Is there a person that you could substitute in the team? This is a way to think about creatively influencing the outcome. C is for combine. A is for add. M is for minimize or maximize. P is put to another use. E is eliminate. So could we eliminate a process? Could we eliminate a stage? And R is rearrange or reverse. Now you could Google that. Michael Michalko is an American writer who has excelled in this particular area of creativity. If any of you want the reference, I'd be happy to provide that for you. But we need to be thinking about how do we influence people, yes, but we need to be doing that more creatively than we do in projects currently, I think. So let's move to the next part of the presentation, and this is the R that I would say is missing from a lot of projects. Reflection. Now, a lot of people will come back and say, well, we haven't got time for that. It's all very well to say we're very pressed for time. You know, people need results. We've got schedules to meet, deadlines to meet. But perhaps more than ever, we need to reflect on what we're doing. So I'd invite you, after this presentation, to take a little bit of time. And you could do this individually. You could do this in a pair or in your project team, perhaps before you get started on your next stage of your project that you're focusing on, and just reflect a little bit. What changes do we need to make to the way we operate in projects? What are the next steps in managing intangibles? And who needs to take these steps? Is it me? Is it you? Is it one of the other team members? And just take some time to reflect on that. That can be done silently. It could be done in a diary mode. It could be done in a group with people in a dialogue mode. And for me, this is the R that we need to do more of. Okay, let's move to the conclusion, and I'm going to take the R from Scamper in the next slide to rearrange what we've looked at in the presentation and to come up with 6 C's as a conclusion. How do we manage intangibles in projects? For me, there are 6 areas. First one is we need to commit to values, and project teams should be working in sync with common values that will underpin all the behaviors, and that when we get into the project team and start working on the project, will drive those projects towards a successful conclusion. Secondly, we need to coax the full potential out of every team member. Everybody's got potential, otherwise they wouldn't be in the team. And we shouldn't be focused on trying to show that one person knows more than the other, but we need to be looking at how do we draw that potential out so that everybody contributes freely and we get a good result. Connecting team members, that's electronically, but that's also in terms of genuinely understanding each other. So sometimes it's good to go off-grid, offline, and connect over a cup of coffee or just when you're chilling out. Contribute value, and that's done by capacity building. And as I said, this is crucial in the modern day and age. This is something we see in the learning and development industry. A lot of companies are interested in building the capacity of their people to withstand the challenges that are coming in the next 2 or 3 years. Another very important one is to control. As a project manager, control action, control results through questioning. The open-ended questions that you ask. You can manage a meeting this way, you can manage your project teams in this way. But equally important as the questioning is the listening actively to the answers you get. You might not like the answers, but you need to be processing those and listening carefully as you go through. And that's hard work. And of course, at the end, we need to collaborate, genuinely collaborate with the others to create a distinctive result. And as we go to the final slide, I'll just leave you with this thought. In the end, it's about being mindful, not mindful, mindful. Now, generally, we tend to think of mindfulness as something that you do by yourself, perhaps meditating. But this is something you can equally do to very great effect in project teams. If you work as a diverse group in a mindful way, you can get some very powerful results. So it doesn't have to be something that you practice alone. It can be in a diverse group. You can do it on a specific task, and you might want to think about this as you move into your second day today on the competition. You can be mindful together on a specific task. I don't mean here multitasking. In fact, a lot of research shows multitasking is a myth, particularly for men. We don't do it particularly well. Staying attuned, and this will be something that you'll be trying to do today as you go into your second day. Don't keep changing stations, try and stay attuned. Difficult, but something that we need to do if we're going to be mindful. And then, of course, rather than surfing and flitting from one thing to another, we need to look for a deeper grasp of the project and the work in hand. So I hope that you'll all be able to do this today as you carry on in your project teams. And that concludes my session on managing intangibles in projects. I hope you found that useful. I'd be happy to continue the dialogue with anybody afterwards from across the world in whatever capacity. And now, if you have questions and comments, I'd be very happy to hear those. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you a lot.
I'm switching off the presentation in a moment. No, you should not be able to see the screen anymore.
Yes,
Okay.
but your camera is not working, like black screen.
It should be working now.
Now it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Now it's time for the questions. So the same principle as previously, you can write them on the questions box. I have, Brian, already some questions because I really enjoyed your presentation. And
Okay, thank you.
I like the point. I like your point about genuine concern. And I have been in two situations previously, into the two kind of opposite situations in my projects. One was a project which I cared about, but I didn't care about like that much about the team. And the other project was where I cared a lot about the team, but I didn't care that much about the project. Which situation might be better?
Well, I think we've all had those. I mean, ideally, you try to aspire towards a care for both. And that's not easy. But I think when I talk about genuine concern, it's more of a practice, a behavior, which you carry, you know, throughout your life. So whether it's in your project teams or in the company or at home, I think we have to get away from this rather plastic idea of have a nice day. I think that this is how I would characterize it. There's many situations where you go to where people think that they're showing concern for you in a service environment by wishing you have a nice day. But if that's something that you just say to everybody, and it becomes a kind of robotic phrase that you just say to anybody and everybody, it tends to lose its impact. So I think what I'd say there is, although it's difficult, just try to be yourself, try to be natural, and try to be mindful, try to be focused on the team, try to listen to people to understand where they're coming from. Again, it's not easy a lot of the time. We know there are so-called difficult people, but sometimes it's us who's the difficult person. So what I would say there is try to practice that mindfulness across the board, and I think if we just be ourselves more, it can go a long way to solving this. I find in a lot of projects there's too many people trying to show off what they know, and my attitude is usually, look, you're on the team, we know you know a lot, otherwise you wouldn't be in the team. So put that aside for one moment. Let's get focused now on just being concerned with the work at hand and our contributions that we can make to it, and also giving the respect to the people who are in the team with us. I don't know whether that answers your question. I hope so.
I heard my answer from that question. Okay, and the other thing I was also I was curious about the point you mentioned, coax full potential of the team. I was wondering how to correctly assess the full potential of team members, and how to make sure that at one point it doesn't start to appear like I'm overloading someone with work or some kind of responsibilities.
Yeah. It's a good question, and I think sometimes you can only trial and error, but I do believe that you don't really know how far you can go until you've been stretched. And therefore, I think you've got to try to stretch your team members. It's a little bit like speed reading. Okay, most people can actually read twice as fast as they currently do, but probably have not gone through the training to do so. That's a bit painful getting there. If you read at 250 words per minute, getting to 500 is a bit painful. But when you get there and then you begin to apply that new skill to your work, it's a revelation, and you feel a great sense of achievement that you've stretched yourself and you've got to that new level of achievement. But yes, sometimes it does happen. We overload people. It's then a sign that, well, perhaps we know from that that's the level that that person can reach. But we have to give people opportunities to do these things. I think we have to give people freedom to try things out. There's a very good joke where there's a guy who invests, he's in an investment company, and he makes an investment of $1 million, which fails spectacularly. And he turns up the next day at the boss's office and goes in and he hands over an envelope to the boss. The boss says, "What's this?" And he says, "It's my resignation letter." Boss says, "Why are you resigning?" The guy says, "I just lost the company $1 million. And don't you want my resignation?" And the boss says, "Why would I want you to resign when I've just spent $1 million training you?" Now, of course, not many project managers, not many managers are going to, in real life, are going to be willing to take that risk. But what I'm saying is, sometimes you have to give people the freedom to fail or stumble a bit, and through that we learn. And we know at least how far we can go and to what level our abilities have been there. And very often, people will, in my experience, will rise to that. It will be a challenge. They appreciate the responsibility they've got from it, and then they'll try to drive it through.
All right. Okay, Kate, we have some questions, I think, also, yeah?
Yeah, we have some questions. Let's think if we have a situation with a lot of teams who are diverse. And how can we manage to communicate efficiently with all of them? Could you propose any ideas to keep guarantee every team to update their work on time without any additional reminding or asking or small talking?
Yep. Okay. This is a big problem nowadays. We have a lot of organizations facing this issue. And I think what's happening a lot of the time is perhaps the project manager himself or herself needs to pay more attention to clarity in the communication of expectations. And also it's about finding out, first of all, if you have a diverse team, what are their interests? This is what I mean earlier on in the presentation about talking about finding out, genuinely talk to people, listen to what motivates them, what moves them, and so on. And if you've selected the right team in the first place, you will find, if you are clear and concise and organized in the way you communicate, particularly in writing, and you make it very clear what your expectations are. I think, for example, in writing, I see a lot of projects where the project manager doesn't specify the date and the time by which he needs something to be done, or why he needs it to be done by that time. And similarly, if a person can't reach the deadline, they don't let anybody know about it. They don't reach out for help, or they don't bother to communicate ahead of time, look, I'm having a bit of problem here, can somebody help me? So I think a lot of it is being more open. You've got to have the right people there in the first place, that's crucial. But then as the project goes along, you have to pay a lot of attention to communicating very clearly your expectations and what the needs are as the project moves forward. And that takes a lot of work. It can be quite tiring, but I believe it's possible to do it.
All right.
Okay, thank you. And one more question. Right, it's during your presentation. how can we maintain people in charity projects when there is no financial benefits involved, which can reduce people motivation pretty much? So it's a question also interesting for me because I have a lot of charity projects.
Yes,
So?
okay. Well, I think this is something where we need to shift attitude significantly. I think we've become too hooked in the last 20 years on everything has got to have a financial return. I mean, there was a very disturbing survey here in Malaysia a few years ago where they interviewed a lot of youngsters at university, undergraduates, and they found that over 80% of them thought that being a millionaire and making money was the most important thing in their work and their life, which I think is quite sad. I mean, there just isn't enough room anyway and not enough resources for everybody to be a millionaire. So again, I think it comes back to, before you start the project, you need to be sure that people who are in your project team are motivated by a genuine desire to help people. In our company, for example, we have a company here, a learning and development company, and our mission is to help people develop through learning. And I make it a point when we interview people, when we're getting project teams together, if there's somebody who clearly doesn't work on that basis, then that person doesn't get in the project team at the beginning, because you know that it's going to be a problem later on. So I would say really interview the selection process before you're putting the team together. Make sure that you've got people who are motivated by something other than money, if that's a charity project, and look for ways that they can get perhaps little rewards. You can always provide them with words of appreciation, or perhaps a little gift, or treat them to a coffee, little things like this. Very often people who are not financially motivated will appreciate the camaraderie, the friendship, the team development itself, if you like. And then I think you've also got to show the benefit at the end. It might not bring you a lot of money, but maybe it's a satisfied group of kids. Maybe it's a new well for a village that didn't have water. So I think it's a question of, you've got to manage the motivations, but you have to be sure that, the values are in alignment, first of all, and perhaps, tune into their interests and how people can develop on that project as well. So it's not just the money, it's also the skills and the abilities that and the experience that they're gaining from that process.
All right. Can we do another, I think, last question maybe?
Sure.
Okay, like not to. Okay, Kate, is there any popular question up there?
There are too many questions here.
Yeah, suddenly. Okay, well, we are looking for a question. Brian, can you give some kind of contact details where people might contact you if they want to get in touch with you personally?
Sure, yeah. We have a website. You can go to the company website, which is www.languageworks, which is all one word, L-A-N-G-U-A-G-E, language works, W-O-R-K-S, .net, N for Norway, E for England, T for Turkey, .my.
.my.
Malaysia. .my. M for Malaysia, Y for Yemen.
Yeah. Languageworks.net.my.
That's right. So you can go to the website, or okay, and then if I'm very happy to talk to people about anything to do with this, you can also contact me at Brian, B-R-I-A-N, Brian at languageworks.net.my. I'd be happy to hear from anybody.
Yeah, okay, but maybe one more question just right now.
Sure. Go ahead.
How is the best way to or form to begin to act with the people assigned to my team as a project manager? I need to be democratic or not?
Okay. Well, I think it's situational. I don't think we can always be democratic. I don't think we should always be autocratic. I'm a big fan of situational leadership. Sometimes there are situations where you need to make a decision quickly and you can't consult everybody about what's the best thing to do. You've just got to be confident in your understanding of the situation and your overview of it and what needs to be done and what stakeholders want you to do or expect you to do. And sometimes you'll need to be fast thinking, perhaps a little autocratic. In general, I think we should aim, of course, to be consultative. We should be asking for opinions because very often other people's ideas are better than ours. So you've got to be looking for people to contribute ideas to the process. And if it's a good idea, no matter who brings it in, then we should be working with it. So that would be my advice on that one. I don't think it's a good idea to sort of label yourself with a way of acting and to try to preserve that through all contexts. As I said earlier, particularly nowadays, the context is changing all the time. So I think you've got to be prepared to wear a number of different hats, and you have to be prepared to react to that context and display a certain behavior or a certain way of making a decision that suits that context. Maybe you won't always be popular, but at the end of the day, it's about getting the result for all stakeholders in that particular project. And hopefully, if people disagree with your decision in that instance, in the overall picture, if it's a successful project, that will just be something that will be water under the bridge, and it will fade away in the light of the success of the project.
Okay, well, we say big thank you to you. This was really nice and useful. I made quite a lot of notes actually during your presentation.
All right, great.
Okay,
thanks very much, everybody. I hope it's useful for you. And good luck with the GeCCo.
Okay, thank you. So I'm muting now you, Brian, and thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye, good luck.
Okay, and for the other teams, so we have finished with our third keynote speaker, and quick update on what is going to happen next. So you have the last 5 hours to do the fourth submission, and after at 12 p.m. London time, we are going to have the next keynote speaker, Yannis Solus, and also having the closing ceremony. The link to this session is already in the website, so you can go there and register for that. Don't miss that for sure as well. And we will be waiting you in 5 hours here. Me with the fabulous Kate. Yep.
Maybe if people or teams have any questions, we can wait, for example, for 10 minutes for any questions here about the process, about maybe submissions or something like that.
Okay, I think we can do that. There are apparently there are some questions going in.
Yeah, I can see a question.
Okay, Katya, is it possible to switch on you on? Can you join this quick question session? Okay, I think Katya is not there. Katya is here, yeah?
Katya, is it possible to?
Yeah. Okay. Radoslav asked the question: do you have to submit everything in the last submission that you have already submitted before, or you should only just add the newest version? You have to do the newest version. Essentially, the last submission will be treated as your final submission. You don't have to submit like everything you have done before. Just do your final work. Yeah. Jury will be able to track your progress by seeing your previous submissions. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay,
so you have extra, like participants have extra, like up to 10 minutes to ask the questions for us. So feel free to use the question box. Yeah, and you can already go to the website and register for the next session.
Yeah. And also you can raise your hand and ask questions. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We have one. Okay, Aknur, please tell us what you want to ask.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes.
When the results will be available?
The results will be available at the awards after the awards ceremony, essentially after 1 month.
On
So
the 10th
the thing,
of December.
yeah, 10th of December. So essentially, jury will have quite a long time, about a month, to evaluate everything because it is quite a lot of work for them to do. So the results will be at 10th of December.
But only the results of 3 first places.
So you will contact us in December then?
We will keep in touch
okay.
with you and reminding about the award ceremony.
Yeah. But we already know what is the date of the award ceremony, so 10th of December.
Okay, got it.
And next question, will we have to send just the PDF file with the answers to the question?
You submit it in a form that you feel it is most appropriate. Make sure it is in the formats we have asked in the case study.
Maybe
but
not
essentially,
all.
yes, jury. Yeah, but jury will be looking for answers to the answers for all of the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any more questions?
Any more questions? We are feeling fresh here.
Yes.
We are feeling quite fresh. I hope you feel that way as well. Okay, maybe let's wait for extra 1 minute and see if there are some questions. Then we will answer. If there are no questions, then we will close the session. I remind you that the link to the next session and the last keynote speaker and closing ceremony is already on the website. So feel free to go there and already register for that. We are hoping to see as many people as we had for the opening ceremony. And also, if you have missed any of these sessions, I am uploading them on our YouTube channel. And also, you can see that there's a playlist published in the web page as well. So you can, for example, now see the opening ceremony and the second keynote. And in about next hour, I will upload the rest of the sessions as well, which we already have had.
Yes. Do we need to submit the video in the first submission? What kind of video?
I mean, that last one video, the teams have to make. No, you have 2 weeks to do that.
Yes, it's a separate task, so no need to complete it now.
Just don't rush with the video making. Kind of like you will submit the case study and your case study results, and then and then you can make a video within next 2 weeks.
Oh. Whoa.
The question started. Okay.
After 24 hours, when the competition is over, your team will have additional time to create a video. Yeah.
What should you add in the video? Whatever you like. Show us how the team worked. What kind of things you had. If you want to see how the content of the video looks like, go to our YouTube channel and look for the last year's submissions of the teams. So you will have a sense of what kind of quality this video should be from technical perspective and from content perspective. We are not expecting something spectacular for you. If you can make that is of course it is fine. But like a collage with the slides going one by one will still be okay with the music in the background.
With fancy music and some comments, like from each person. Yeah. Okay.
The teams we will announce the winning teams, and all the other teams will receive a feedback from the jury, kind of like what was good and what should be improved, like in your teams regarding the case study. So I hope, Oscar, that answers your question.
So
will the case studies how are they going to be evaluated? Like separately? Does every single jury member looks at every single case study, or are they divided amongst them?
We have jury pairs. They will evaluate. So one team will be evaluated by one jury pair, and then they will discuss their results and come up with the final decision.
Okay. Any more questions? 1 minute. When I told previously 1 minute, suddenly there were like 5 questions in. All right.
Okay. You will be able to ask questions also during the next live session. So
okay. So yeah. Okay. I think we can close this.
During the next session, there will no time to change anything in the final submission.
Well, I think I can, like, this last 5 hours going on, so only questions would be kind of like about submitting the things itself or how it's going to be evaluated. But okay, I think we can close the session. Let's not waste any more time. So see you after 5 hours in the next session. The link is already in the website for the registration. So, and we were happy that you managed to come to this live session with the keynote speaker. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and bye for now.
Bye.
Good luck.